Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. British resident Shakir Amr has been freed from Guantanamo after more than 13 years behind bars. He was the last British resident imprisoned at Guantanamo. Amr had been cleared for release since 2007, but the Pentagon kept him locked up without charge. During his time in captivity, he claims he was subjected to abuses, including torture, beatings, and sleep deprivation. At one point, he lost half his body weight while on hunger strike. Amr is en route to London, where he'll join his wife and 4 children. In Texas, 27 women detained at a for-profit immigrant detention center say they're on a hunger strike to demand immediate release. Most of the women are from Central America, which has seen a surge in migrants fleeing violence and abuse. They're held at the T. Don Hutto Residential Center in Taylor, Texas, as they apply for asylum. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, known as ICE, denies there's a hunger strike. This comes as another hunger strike by 14 South Asian asylum seekers held at Louisiana's for-profit LaSalle Detention Center enters its 12th day. In Turkey, police have raided and shut down the offices of television channels and newspapers ahead of Sunday's national election. Police fired pepper spray and water cannons at protesters outside. Turkish journalist Mustafa Kilic, who works for one of the raided newspapers, spoke out.
We came to work feeling as if we are criminals. We prepared today's newspapers under police blockade. We have mentioned it in our stories. We are under police blockade. Psychologically, we cannot work, and that is how we prepared this newspaper for print. As for tomorrow's newspaper, today the trustees came and talked to us and said, go away if that's how you think.
In Yemen, Doctors Without Borders is seeking security guarantees after one of its hospitals was bombed by the U.S.-backed Saudi-led coalition Monday. At least one nurse was injured in the strikes. Saudi authorities have denied their forces carried out the bombing. The attack in Yemen comes weeks after a U.S. gunship repeatedly bombed a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan, killing at least 30 people. Meanwhile, an estimated 700 medical professionals have been killed in Syria since the war began in 2011. On Thursday, hundreds of medical workers staged a die-in near the United Nations in New York City to protest the targeting of healthcare workers. Dr. Deanne Marchbein of Doctors Without Borders spoke out.
I've worked in Syria. I've worked in support of Syria. And the Syrian people are asking, has the world forgotten about us? Do they know what's happening? Do they know that that snipers are targeting doctors or nurses? This is horrible. It's unacceptable.
This comes as Secretary of State John Kerry meets with officials from nearly 20 nations, including Iran, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Turkey, Britain, France, and Germany, to discuss the ongoing conflict in Syria. It's the first time Iran is taking part in global talks on Syria after the U.S. stopped objecting to its involvement. In Florida, a retired Tampa police captain accused of fatally shooting a man at a movie theater after a dispute about texting during the previews is reportedly planning to use Florida's controversial Stand Your Ground law in his defense. Police say former Captain Curtis Reeves began arguing with fellow moviegoer Chad Olson about his texting. Reeves claims Olson then hit him in the face, although witnesses, including Reeves' own wife, dispute that claim. Reeves' lawyers plan to argue that the shooting was justified under the Stand Your Ground law because Reeves had reasonable belief his life was in danger. Both former Captain Reeves and Olson were white. Meanwhile, in Texas, a white police officer who is accused of fatally shooting an unarmed African-American man has persuaded a judge to throw out the case after arguing he's immune from state charges because he was working for a federal task force at the time of the shooting. Officer Charles Kleinert was employed as an Austin police officer in 2013 when he says he accidentally shot and killed Larry Jackson, Jr. The officer began chasing Jackson after the man allegedly attempted to enter a locked bank, then fled. When Officer Kleinert caught up with Jackson, he says he meant to hit the man in the neck with his pistol. Instead, the officer fired his gun, killing Jackson. On Thursday, a Texas judge ruled the state court has no jurisdiction over Officer Kleinert in this case because he'd been investigating an unrelated bank robbery for his federal task force when he began the chase. In Mexico City, the Museum of Memory and Tolerance has unveiled an altar to the journalists killed over the last decade ahead of this weekend's Day of the Dead celebrations. At least 32 reporters have been killed in Mexico since 1992, making it one of the deadliest countries for journalists. Dario Ramirez of the human rights group Article 19 spoke at the unveiling.
It's an altar that speaks for itself, of a punishing silence, which undermines a society's right to be informed. It's a humble altar, but with a nationwide importance, which is clearly evident. The journalists who have been murdered and who have found no justice, it's simply a reminder of what we are losing.
In Washington, the Senate has passed a bipartisan budget deal to avert government default. The two-year budget includes cuts to Social Security, disability benefits, and Medicare payments to providers. New revenue would come from sales of U.S. oil reserves and use of public airwaves for telecommunications firms. It'll also increase military spending by about $25 billion for each of the next 2 fiscal years. And the European Parliament has voted to support a non-binding resolution that calls on EU member states to protect NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden from extradition. On Thursday, the Parliament voted 285 to 281 to, quote, prevent Snowden's extradition or rendition by third parties in recognition of his status as whistleblower and international human rights defender. Edward Snowden celebrated the vote in a tweet, calling it a game changer. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.